Ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens and tourists from around the world, today I stand before you to speak about two serious issues. The first is illegal technologies being used against our people and workers, such as radio wave brain hacking, mind control, and other forms of electromagnetic weapons. The second is election fraud that has recently become a major topic of public debate. My fellow citizens, these issues have the potential to cause very serious harm and long-term consequences for your future. Let me give you an example from Korea history. Just before the Japanese invasion of Korea in 1592, a Korean envoy named Hwang Yun-gil visited Japan and urgently warned the royal court that Japan was preparing for invasion. But his warning was ignored. What happened as a result? The Imjin War broke out and devastated our future for 7 long years. If you fail to listen carefully to the warning I am presenting today and prepare ourselves, we may face similar grave difficulties in the future. First, I would like to speak about the harm caused by radio wave weapons, especially brain hacking, mind control, and electromagnetic torture. Do you know that many people around us are suffering from those harms? Electromagnetic waves are a medium that can potentially influence the human brain and even inflict pain. Yet, most ordinary people are unaware of this possibility. Furthermore, in our country, there are currently no clear legal regulations governing such technology. If that is the case, then those who possess such technology, whether individuals or organizations, could easily misuse them against citizens and workers. As I explain later regarding election fraud, even when election laws and systems clearly exist, fraudulent activities still occur. If wrongdoing can occur even in a regulated system, then imagine how easily illegal radio wave brain hacking and weapons use could be carried out when there are no effective legal restrictions. There are communities of victims who suffer from brain hacking, mind control, and electromagnetic weapons. For example, Myeongdong online community relating these issues had 3,960 members, while another had 648 members. I myself am also a member of one of those communities. In addition, several other similar online groups exist. Do you think all these people join such communities, regularly hold meetings, and even organize protests simply because they have nothing better to do? In many cases, victims of those harms do not even realize that they are being affected. In other cases, people recognize what is happening to them but remain silent. If that is the case, then could it not be possible that you yourself are experiencing brain hacking, mind control, or electromagnetic torture without realizing it? Or that you might experience it in the future? As one of many people who have been affected, I appeal to you today in order to protect the human rights and free will of our future, our people. For your reference, I am currently employed at HD Heavy Industries, working in the engine machinery business planning department, and my major was mechanical engineering. The reason I am explaining this is to emphasize that what I am about to say is not an absurd story that I have simply invented. Have you ever heard of the MK Ultra project? It was a secret mind control experiment program conducted by the CIA during the early Cold War period. The project began in 1953 and was halted after 1973, and it caused major controversies regarding human rights violations and ethical misconduct both within the United States and internationally. The experiment involved methods such as the use of powerful hallucinogenic drugs like LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, drug administration, and electric shocks. As a result, numerous secret experiments were conducted without the consent of the subject, and many participants suffered irreversible physical and psychological damage. In 1975, the existence of MK Ultra was first officially exposed during hearing of the United States State Congress. Later, in 1995, then President Bill Clinton publicly issued an apology for the past human rights violation related to MK Ultra. The technology developed through such research have continued to evolve and are now considered core technology related to mental manipulation and cognitive behavioral control. First, these technologies can read, delete, modify, or insert memories stored in the brain. Second, they can analyze the electrical activity of the brain in real time. It becomes possible to interpret unspoken thoughts, images, and intentions. Third, they can manipulate human emotion, judgment, decisions, and action. This is one of the most ethically and politically sensitive areas. First, external devices can stimulate the brain directly, allowing a person to perceive signals as if they were visual images or voices. Among the many technologies currently being applied in practice, I will briefly mention a few examples. Researchers in our country, including teams from the IBS and Yonsei universities, developed a technology known as magnetogenetic interface for neurodynamics. This technology gained global attention as the first case in the world demonstrating mind control capability. Do you know that there are already numerous patents related to satellite, remote wireless network, and brain-computer interfaces at BCI? Why do such patents exist? Because they were developed with the intention of being used. In fact, early and fundamental patents related to wireless brain wave communication have existed since the 1990s. For example, among US patents, satellite therapy delivery system for brain neuromodulation refers to a patent for satellite based on brain stimulation and sensing technology. Wireless brain-computer interface implantable refers to a patent for implantable wireless interface connecting the brain and a computer. Cell phone-based wireless and mobile brain machine refers to interface refers to a patent enabling communication between the brain and a computer through mobile phone. In addition, let us look at the recent case in China. A patent titled Method for Controlling a Simulator Brain-Computer Interface System and Chip was filed by Huawei. This patent concerns a technology related to controlling stimulator BCI system and neural interface chips. Furthermore, a company in Shanghai called Eurogens, together with a medical team at Hwasan Hospital, publicly reported that they attempted motor and speech decoding using their self-developed 256-channel flexible implantable BCI on an actual patient. The technology I explained earlier are publicly announced and officially disclosed technology. However, the technologies that are being developed quietly and privately are likely far more advanced and sophisticated. What is the evidence? I myself am that evidence. I have personally been subjected to illegal experimentation like a human test subject. I am the witness. In 2018, the company where I work, Hyundai Heavy Industries, sent me on an assignment to Shanghai, China for 6 months. However, after about 3.5 months, I returned to Korea early because of electromagnetic torture attack. About 2 months after arriving in China, I began experiencing electromagnetic attacks from someone staying on the floor above mine in the hotel. To escape the attacks, I moved to 2 different hotels, but the attackers followed me each time and continued the harassment. At the office in China, my computer was repeatedly hacked. Numbers in reports I have written were changed. And every night in hotel, I endured severe electromagnetic attacks. Eventually, I could not continue. I returned to Korea after 3.5 months. Within the company, they spread the rumor that I have returned simply because of homesickness. Even now, since 2018, I believe I have continued to suffer the same type of attack from a man named Seoul, who lived in the apartment above mine and who previously retired from Hyundai Heavy Industries. I have filed complaints against him more than 11 times, yet he has received no penalty. In my view, he appeared to be protected while continuing to use electromagnetic weapons from the apartment above mine. A similar case occurred in 2016 in Havana, Cuba, where employees at the U.S. Embassy reported hearing strange sounds and feeling pressure vibration. Afterward, they developed symptoms similar to brain injury. Similar incidents were reported among U.S. diplomats and CIA personnel in several countries. This phenomenon became known as Havana syndrome. Second, surveillance through thought and memory hacking. Since returning from Shanghai in 2018, teams where I have worked have been monitoring and controlling me. My computer often moved by itself by being hacked. When I quietly said to myself, "Who is doing this?" Someone nearby sometimes raised his hand as if mocking me. When I stand up to go to the restroom, people who seem to know in advance often appear around the desk, taking turns, approaching me, speaking to me, or making threatening remarks. They even refer to things I have seen in the past or memories from dreams as if they have access to them. At the same time, they sometimes attempt to implant or reinforce ideas that are not true. When my memories are being hacked, I often feel extremely tired and drowsy or headache. Third, visual information surveillance. Whether at work, at home or even outdoor when no one is nearby, I often experience situations where someone later speaks about things I saw the previous day. Sometimes even receive phone calls in real time where the callers speak as if they are watching my surroundings and environment. This happens almost every day. First, manipulation of thought. This can involve psychological influence, subconscious influence, and manipulation of emotion and feelings. When this kind of manipulation occurs, I experience headaches because my brain feels as if it's entering a state of resonance of synchronization. At times, my mind becomes blank, making it difficult to think clearly or even speak properly. Sometimes, when I look back unconsciously like this, I notice signs or written messages that seem connected to thoughts I have earlier, almost like responses to them. There are also frequent moments when I suddenly speak internally about a subject that appears to match the interest of those around me while I'm working at the company. Fifth, control of physical behavior. While traveling from Busan to Changwon on a business trip, I suddenly turned the steering wheel like this involuntarily and hit a roadside curb block, causing a tire to burst. Another time, when I was about to sleep and silently cursed at the attacker in my mind, I suddenly struck my own head with my outstretched hand like this. At 6, major auditory and olfactory hallucination. At night, when I try to sleep, I once saw a geometric white rectangular shape resembling a computer monitor. Regarding auditory hallucination, it sometimes feels as if someone is internationally speaking to me. The voice sounds extremely vivid, as if it is being heard inside my mind. It feels like a one-to-one conversation. In one case, I even heard a voice specially suggesting work-related matters. 7. Sexual torture. At times, I have experienced prolonged forced erection as a form of torture. I have also personally heard many other men describe experiencing the same form of abuse. And female victims have been suffering from sexual torture as well. 8. Mobile phone and computer hacking. My personal computer at work has been repeatedly hacked for 7 years since my return from Shanghai. I reported the issue to company's internal security team and computer call center more than 100 times, but nothing was corrected. If the people responsible for the security are the same people conducting the hacking, how could it be fixed? When I tell people around me about this incident, they usually claim they know nothing about it or avoid the conversation. My mobile phone has also shown strange behavior since 2018. Alarms blink by themselves and apps I never opened appear several layers deep in the system. And I have experienced my phone being controlled from outside countless times. Those who give the orders and those who carry out these attacks do not regard the victim as human beings. This is something I have experienced personally. And many of the perpetrators are also victims of the electromagnetic brain hacking and mind control. They are not aware of this. Lies I have been continuously followed by stalkers everywhere on a daily basis. My apartment and my car have also been repeatedly broken into. I reported these incidents to the police many times, but it was useless. At times like these, I have often felt deep despair, thinking that I live without the protection of the law. Victims like me are internationally referred to as TIs, targeted individuals. Since 2018, I have filed complaints and petitions regarding these damages to almost every relevant institution in our country, including the National Human Rights Commission, the prosecution, the Ministry of Justice, the police, and the national petition system. I have submitted dozens of reports. However, until now, there has not been a single case where my claim progressed to a formal face-to-face inquiry. The reason is simple. There are no related law in our country. In the United States, in 2001, the Congressman Denis Kucinich introduced the Space Preservation Act, which included provision to prohibit such technology. Russia also enacted Federal Law number 103 on July 26, 2001, which prohibits the use of non-lethal weapons that can influence the human body or mind, including electromagnetic waves, radiation, ultrasound, and infrasound. Do you know that throughout the world, both in the East and West, people are holding protests demanding the ban of electromagnetic weapons? Last year, in 2025, I personally participated with other victims of electromagnetic weapon attacks in holding public speeches demanding legislation banning these weapons. These events were held in Gwanghwamun, Hongik University, Sincheon, and in front of the National Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, as AI technology continues to advance, the time we have left to prevent a future where everyone would suffer the same fate as I have experienced is rapidly shrinking. Many of the technology required for this system are already nearly complete. What remains is only a matter of time. The day may soon come when a person's brain neural information can be synchronized, allowing others to extract sensory information and memory throughout Wi-Fi or personal mobile devices. I know this because I myself have become in fact a human test subject. I do not know exactly how many people are suffering from brain hacking, mind control, electromagnetic torture, and stalking. I do not know what percentage of the entire population is affected, nor what percentage of employees in the company where you work might be victims. But one thing is certain. A tremendous number of people are suffering from these damages. Many of you here may already be victims without even realizing it. I swear, with everything I have, that what I have told you about my experience is not a lie, but the truth. I am a Christian who believes in God. Do you know why God allowed both good and evil to coexist in this world? It is because God gave humanity the most precious gift, free will. Therefore, we can choose between good and evil, but the forces of evil are trying to take away that free will and control us according to their own desires. In other words, they are attempting to place themselves in the position of God. Will you simply stand by and watching until all of you become slaves? If we stand together, raise public awareness, and create growth, we can stop this. The first step in solving such a serious problem is for you to recognize that this problem exists. The next topic is election fraud. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know that election fraud has become a global issue? In addition to South Korea, election fraud has either been confirmed or has become a major national controversy in countries such as the United States, Venezuela, Russia, Belarus, Congo, Dominica, and Myanmar. One organization that has played a significant role in election system is the Association of World Election Bodies, AWEB, which is headquartered in Incheon, South Korea. There have been serious controversies claiming that election systems supplied by AWEB were used in presidential elections in several countries. U.S. President Donald Trump has also repeatedly stated in interviews that fraud occurred in the 2020 U.S. presidential election and that the result led to the election of President Joe Biden. Election fraud and communist revolutions share certain similarity. Communist revolutions often begin with groups who believe they have been marginalized. They label the existing political and social system as evil, reject the current legal order, destroy the existing institution, and justify violence in order to overthrow the state. Election fraud works in a similar way. It rejects the principles and legal framework of free democratic election, manipulate the electoral process, and allow specific groups to seize control of the executive and legislative branches, and eventually even the judiciary. Once these three branches of government are captured, the nation can easily turn into a dictatorship. Those who pursue such revolution often justify their actions by claiming that they are pursuing an idea for the nation and the people. But history clearly shows that absolute power without checks and balances inevitably become corrupt. The original idea disappeared, and wealth and national benefit became concentrated in the hands of a small ruling elite. Since 2020, I have watched with deep frustration as patriotic citizens struggle desperately to expose election fraud, while the National Assembly and the media largely ignore their efforts. Even President Yoon Suk-yeol cited suspicion of election fraud as one of the major reasons when declaring martial law. Yet, instead of thoroughly investigating the election fraud, the political system simply proceeded with the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. In last year's June 3rd presidential election, the same day voting results showed Lee Jae-myung received 38% and Kim Moon-soo receiving 53%, giving Kim Moon-soo a 15% lead. However, something very unusual occurred. Exit poll conducted by the National Election Commission, a survey of the voters immediately after they cast their ballot on election day. It is also said that these results were consistent with the surveys conducted by the three major broadcasters. Yet, the exit poll results showed Lee Jae-myung at 52% and Kim Moon-soo at 41%. Furthermore, it is said that there was no significant difference in the age distribution between early voters and those who voted on election day. So, how can such a result be explained? Early voting reported showed 63% to 26%, and the final result became 49% and to 41%, leading to the election of Lee Jae-myung as president. Recently, in a YouTube debate between John Han-gil and Lee Jun-seok sharply discussed the election fraud. In addition, the recently released documentary film that day, which is also available on YouTube, presents these issues very openly. The election fraud began to emerge as a major issue starting with the 2020 general election. While watching the live vote counting broadcast of the April 15th, 2020 general election, I heard the announcement that exit polls showed the Democratic Party leading by a large margin. Later, however, the actual votes cast on election day showed the People Power Party leading. At the moment, I felt that something was very strange. As expected, beginning the next day, numerous broadcasts presenting evidence of election fraud appeared, including programs by Gong Byung-ho TV and former lawmaker Min Kyung-woo. The result of early vote ratios in Seoul, Gyeonggi, and Incheon were exactly same, 64 to 36 in favor of the Democratic Party across the board. An outcome many people argued was statistically impossible. There were also reports of fake ballot videos showing manipulation of ballot sorting machines, damaged seals, and numerous ballot papers that appeared completely flat and unfolded, as if they had never been folded. In addition, there were cases of ghost voters, including a voter born in 1876 who could have been 144 years old, as well as 14 voters older than the oldest person recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records. Most notably, the pattern was consistent. In early voting, the Democratic Party led by a large margin, while in election day voting, the People Power Party led. This raises an important question. How was President Yoon Suk-yeol elected in the 2020 presidential election? According to calculations presented by experts on Gong Byung-ho TV, the president vote rate in the 2017 presidential election and 2020 general election was about 19%. In the 2020 presidential election, it is claimed that approximately 2.24 million votes were manipulated in a similar manner to previous elections. However, this represented only 13.6% which allowed candidate Yoon Suk-yeol to win the presidency. In other words, those attempting to manipulate the election may have tried to secure a narrow victory, but ultimately failed. According to Lesson documentary film That Day, associated with Lee Myeongdong and Jeon Han-gil, the scale of election manipulation is described as follows. In the 2020 general election, it is claimed that 40 district seats that should have gone to the People Power Party were shifted to the Democratic Party through election manipulation. As a result, the original result of Democratic Party, 123 seats, and People Power Party, 124 seats, became Democratic Party, 161 seats, and People Power Party, only 84 seats. In the 2024 general election, it is claimed that 42 seats belong to the People Power Party were shifted to the Democratic Party. Thus, the original result of Democratic Party, 109 seats, and People Power Party, 142 seats, became Democratic Party, 161 seats, and People Power Party, only 90 seats. Ladies and gentlemen, one reason politics seems to be deteriorating is that presidents and members of National Assembly are no longer being chosen directly by the true will of the people. As a result, politicians no longer hear the voice of the citizens. Should we not thoroughly investigate election fraud, correct what is wrong, dismantle the current National Election Commission, and rebuild it as a new organization to conduct election? Systematic solutions are actually quite simple. Instead of printing the stamp of the ballot manager, we should use personal seals and, like Taiwan, conduct manual vote counting. In addition, if all early voting ballot boxes were monitored by CCTV and broadcast live on the internet, and if the ballot box transportation were also publicly live streamed, would then not eliminate all suspicion. However, the National Election Commission and the National Assembly have not accepted these demands. Furthermore, the audit function of the election management organization must be strengthened. Many advanced countries have independent auditing bodies and overseas election management institutions. Our country, however, does not. The National Election Commission is not subjected to the audit by the Board of Audit or Inspection and can only be checked by the National Assembly, making it a highly unusual institutional structure. Therefore, if election fraud occurs, there is practically no external mechanism to verify it. Since 2015, every chairperson of National Election Commission has been either a justice of the Supreme Court or someone serving currently as one. Despite numerous complaints and lawsuits filed by civic organizations and individuals concerning election fraud, this structure creates a potential conflict of interest as the head of the commission comes from the judiciary itself. In effect, many argue that South Korea is conducting elections under a system that resembles those those of North Korea or China, where election exists largely informed rather than substance. President, members of the National Assembly, and other elected officials are determined by the election manipulation groups rather than by the vote you cast. If election fraud continues, citizens will lose your rights to political participation, and if the technology such as brain hacking and mind control spread, people may even lose their free will. Ladies and gentlemen, will you be satisfied living as slaves or robots as long as you can survive? Last year, after traveling across the country, giving street speeches about election fraud, also traveled nationwide delivering speeches opposing brain hacking, mind control, and electromagnetic weapons. Some people showed interest, but many others seemed unable to fully grasp the great seriousness of these issues. In my estimation, within 5 years, it may become entirely possible to enslave the entire population through brain hacking technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, if elections were truly fair, many of our political problems would be solved. We could protect liberal democracy. If brain hacking, mind control, electromagnetic torture, and stalking were clearly prohibited by law, as Russia has done, and regulated at the level similar to firearms, we could protect our free will. The first step is for our citizens to recognize the seriousness of this situation. Please look at these issues with objective, calm, and open eyes. Ask AI, research online, and think deeply about these matters. In the book of Genesis, the story of Noah's Ark tells us that Noah warned people about the coming flood, but people ignored the warning and were destroyed. Ladies and gentlemen, we must rise with courage. We will this land that is collapsing. We must have the courage to say that something is wrong when it is wrong. If we simply watch and hope things will somehow change, and nothing will ever change. Water that begins at a small spring becomes a stream. Streams gather to form rivers, and rivers eventually flow into the great ocean. In the same way, if each of you recognize this issue and your thoughts and efforts come together, we can form a powerful force capable of bringing change. Let us join hands and move forward together. If we stand together, we can do it. Thank you for listening.